Good afternoon, greater Philadelphia area. This is Toole Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM. I'm Tom Toole. She's Stacey Mitchell. She's Sarah Tymon, and we all work at the Tom Toole Sales Group at RE/MAX Mainline, the number one RE/MAX team in Pennsylvania since 2018. And if you get some value out of this, we're going to be talking about an interview with NAR President Kevin Sears. Apparently, he had to get his arm twisted to show up for this thing with the people over at BAM. Home Services settled a commission lawsuit, and so did Douglas Elliman for a drastic different amount, $250 million compared to just over $17 million. But first, we're going to be talking about how mortgage rates have kind of been hanging in the sevens, starting to move up a little bit. So if you get some value out of this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and if you want to talk about how all of this affects your real estate needs, click on the link in the comments to schedule a call with one of these two ladies and professionals here. So how have your clients been reacting to mortgage rates? I mean, we're seeing sevens are kind of here to stay. Like 7% is like best case scenario, excellent credit, all that sort of stuff. And it doesn't look like they're going anywhere anytime soon. And if you look at the what's been happening just over the past week, and there's, the Federal Reserve has their Federal Open Markets Committee meeting on Wednesday, and the jobs report is coming on Friday. This could go one of two ways. What's been the market reaction so far? It seems like the market it's very funny, where it's either white hot or it's almost very cold, and there's really no in between because of these rates that we're seeing. I don't know if that's just me. I want to hear what you two are seeing in the field.
Since the interest rates were up last week, we looked at a particular home, and given the interest rates and the taxes on that particular property, it priced them out. So they couldn't even put an offer in. Yeah. And it was a really great property. So that was one of the first negative case studies that I experienced. Other than that, my other clients, they haven't really, they haven't really touched on the interest rates at this point. So we're still looking. We're still out there doing showings, but either they haven't seen the home that they wanted to put an offer in, or when I sent over cost sheets, it just wasn't even a factor at that point because their motivation was much, more urgent. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for clients who are motivated. Obviously, it's something that they're gonna see that difference, but they'll adjust their offers, or they will, if you've got flexibility to move to maybe like some lower taxes or something like that. And then interestingly enough, I feel like I had a conversation with a client last week, as things were still up, and just because of the particular house that I was sending some information on, the taxes were lower. And I think because of all of the negativity that you hear just about buying in general, when I actually sent the numbers over to him, he was very pleasantly surprised. So
that's always nice.
I think that if you hear, like, if people are just assuming the worst, when they actually get the numbers, it's like, oh, okay, I can do that.
Yeah, this looks good. Wow.
Right.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Well, that's where it's valuable to actually be able to communicate costs. Like, what's it going to cost you to get in? What's your monthly payment? What's it going to cost you from a cash lump sum perspective? Because a lot of agents, they rely on emotion and they rely on reaction to close things instead of data. And I'm clear we're going to be moving way off of that here as things continue to progress. Is that it's going to be really about having a knowledge base and understanding what's happening. So we've got these reports coming out, and we're seeing, according to like House and Wire's Mortgage Rate Center, we're seeing the average 30-year fixed on conventional loans is coming in at like 7.5, and that's nationally. Locally, we're seeing about 7 1/8, and that's in a perfect scenario. So the economic data has been pretty solid. GDP growth looks good, and we've got jobs coming up. And the employment wage index the Fed uses shows good wage growth. So people are anticipating a more hawkish Fed at tomorrow's meeting. I don't think we're going to see rate cuts anytime soon. I think that's going to be a second half of the year thing, best case scenario. Even as we're seeing inventory grow a little bit, I think what we're in for, and you look at what's happening down in Florida, and the rest of the Sun Belt states, Texas and Arizona specifically, they're seeing massive inventory growth there. Florida's seen a 56% increase in inventory this year because it's a very different market. And what happens in the South and happens in these warmer weather climates eventually comes north. So what that tells me is that I would anticipate we see inventory continuing to grow, just looking at the numbers from week over week. And Bright MLS does a really nice job putting together a weekly market report. And if you look at their weekly market report, just for the week ending April 28th, let me get back to it here, they're seeing that the same week last year, we're seeing a bump in inventory of 5.8%. And then they go into the Philadelphia metro and some other local places here, but that's 5.8% is what we're seeing for the entire Bright MLS, which is more of a northeastern market. And then if you look at where we were compared to last week, it's 1.9%, and that's again a bump in inventory. I'm clear that's going to continue. I don't see that stopping even as prices continue to rise. I mean, the median price point is up 7.3% compared to this time last year for the entire Bright MLS as well. So it sounds like some people are very sensitive to this. Others are just still moving ahead. Were you in like a high tax area that they were looking at, Stacey? I'm kind of curious about this because that doesn't make a difference depending on where you are.
Well, overall, it's really house dependent in this market that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. So, some of the houses we looked at, the taxes, were in like $3,500 or $4,000. This particular house, it was $6,700.
Yeah,
wasn't necessarily that the house was in a majorly different price point. It was a very similar price point. It's just that difference in taxes plus the difference in the interest rate. Mm-hmm. It pushed them over what they were comfortable with their monthly payment.
Yeah.
So we just couldn't even entertain it, unfortunately. Yeah, it was a great house.
So where do those folks go from here? Are they pulling out? Are they looking at other areas? Because this is the advice real estate agents need to be giving, and this is what clients need to hear is, okay, this didn't work. What's next? How do you keep people moving ahead? Because that's the challenge for a lot of home buyers right now, and really home sellers if they're looking to buy something.
Well, it didn't deter them. They just realized, okay, this is just not going to be the one. It would just be too uncomfortable. But, the search continues. Let's keep looking. Let's keep getting out there. Check the inventory. And they're on board with it because they do have real motivation. They want to buy.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, with that, I mean, and Sarah, you have people that are those people also motivated? They're just moving ahead and it doesn't seem to be bothering them? Or, I think this is so fascinating how different clients are reacting in different ways here because this is not going to go away. And I think some people are just getting used to it at this point.
Yeah. I mean, well, I guess I'm thinking of two different scenarios. The one that I was talking about where a client was pleasantly surprised by the numbers. He's somebody that kind of had pulled away for a bit and is now coming back in. I have other clients who it can be tough out there while you're getting some like very solid, very good, like just great offers that they got beat out. And I think if the motivation is there and they're willing to keep going, and that's the case of these clients, you just have to, you don't know who you're going to be competing against for the next one. And in some cases, because there are when a home pops up that's very, very similar, same school district, same area, to the last that you just lost an offer on, especially if you know that you were number two, it's like, well, at least that number one is no longer in the pool. They're gone now. We
That's
still have to be aggressive, but that person that went well beyond where, and I knew in this one case that we were offer number 2 out of 10. They're not in the pile anymore. So somebody else can always enter in, but because it wasn't the first scenario where we were number 2. Mm-hmm. So you just have to keep going and not be discouraged because at some point you will be number 1.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I always like to make sure that the other agent on the other side, the listing agent, knows how terribly interested my clients were. Mm-hmm. And if anything should happen and that deal come unraveled, please let us be the first ones that you call.
Right.
It happens.
Yeah.
It really happens. Even if it's not immediately, like they didn't get the earnest deposit, but maybe it's further, deeper into the deal.
Yeah.
And, the agents have reached out and said, are your clients still interested? Do they find something else? Is this something we could possibly work out? So it does happen.
I mean, I think that forming a good relationship with the agent on the other side of the transaction is one of the smartest things that you can do to keep yourself top of mind and to get those additional tidbits of information and to have them want to work with you, have them want to reach out with you, especially if a deal fell apart. Like, I want to work with that person, you know?
Well, and I think what you're talking about there, Sarah, and you're really good at this, is keeping people moving ahead and staying positive, because the negativity that comes out of people's mouths and the body language and the tonality, it can really crush any hope here, because as much as we want to sit here and look at all these stats and analyze everything, buying and selling real estate is a very emotional thing for a lot of people, and if you can't keep them moving forward and you're not able to deal with a setback, as an agent, you're hurting your clients, because that's what they're hiring you to do. And so many agents get like so emotionally invested, they can't detach from the outcome. They're screaming and yelling on the phone. It's not a good space to be in. So that skill that Sarah's talking about is really important. Like, hey, the good news is that's one less person we have to compete with. Like, you got to just keep moving ahead, because they want to blame somebody, right? Everyone here get blamed for someone losing out on a house because they didn't take your advice, besides me.
Yeah.
Or blamed for a decision someone else made that you advised against and it worked out exactly how you told them it would. That's unfortunately, what real estate is we're advising people. So that's one of the challenges that we run into. So as we move through the year here, so we got this Fed meeting later this week. It starts midweek. Right now, there's a 99.5% chance that rates go unchanged, which is expected. I don't think anyone thought rates were going to go the other way. Now, the flip side is, if you look at Altos Research, as of April 26th, there were 556,000 single-family homes on the market. That's up 2.4% from the previous week. And there was about 13,000 additional properties added to the market during that previous week. And the weekly volume of new listings is now higher than at any time last year. So I think that's another thing to keep people moving forward. You've said this to me before on the show, Sarah. There's new homes coming to the market every day. You've got to just keep it going and and have that conversation with folks. There's some opportunity here if you know how to navigate it. Now, you're saying it's still tough putting deals together, Stacey. So tell us a little bit about, even though we're seeing more, what some of the challenges are for sellers and for buyers in the current climate, because it's not. I don't think it's ever easy putting a deal together, by the way, just so everyone's very clear. But what are some of the current challenges that are market dependent you're seeing right now?
Oh my gosh, it's so varied. I mean, anything's possible. The perfect deal can go sideways at the very last minute. Like someone's wire transfer it came through as an ACH and not a wire transfer. So we couldn't close today. So, I mean, there's so many things you just can't anticipate that can happen. But just putting deals together would be, I see that some sellers require leaseback. So you have to explain that to the buyers. What does that mean? What are you willing to risk? How long are you willing to do this? And, so leasebacks are a real thing these days too, because sellers, some of them have to sell in order to buy. So that's, part of the offer. I think that those homes that the sellers are requesting a leaseback, I think there's opportunity there. They typically have the least amount of offers on the home because some buyers can't do that. They're not in a position to allow a leaseback on a property. So I do look for those. But that can be challenging. And definitely still inspections, getting through inspections, especially if it involves septic. Yeah. So I think that's a big one. And just, HOA documents. There could be something in the HOA. There was something that popped up in, this was with another agent, but I was told that a deal fell apart because inside the HOA documents that they were reading, if there were more than 2 complaints for a family dog in the community, that the dog would have to leave the community.
Oh my gosh.
So
I've heard of this before.
Yeah. So the buyer is terminated based on HOA documents because of that one sentence.
Which I would have terminated for as well, by the way.
Yeah.
I would have done this as a dog owner. I think that's that's a hard home to sell now because of what this HOA has done, which is it's a problem. Keep going.
It's the dog's world. Like everybody has dogs. So and just know, even if you know your dog's well behaved, What if the perception is that your dog wasn't well behaved and somebody had a complaint?
Right.
And then another one.
Or, I mean, even with like dogs bark, right? Yeah. So even if you are respectful about, I don't let them out super early, or I don't have them out super late, or if they bark, I make them come in, you know, depending on how sensitive the neighbors are or how quickly they are to complain, like you could be doing everything in your control to be a good neighbor and to try to respect the community. But like, you don't know who or like how quickly people complain. And if that's in there, like, has that been enforced before?
Right. Has it been enforced? And who's to say it wouldn't be enforced?
Right. Because, yeah, even if it hasn't in the past, suddenly somebody might really dig into that.
Might get upset and they, you know, want it to be enforced. And that's very risky. So I can understand that. But, boy, we'll have to dig into HOA documents a little deeper from here on out. That was, you know, a learning experience for me. I never heard of such a thing in HOA documents. So every deal is different. Every deal has challenges. Since the interest rates went up, there's been a couple of, you know, LTVs that are out of whack and deals are falling apart because of that. So hence, I've gotten a couple phone calls from other agents. Are your clients still interested? That type of thing. Yeah. So all across the board, you even talk to other agents and they're experiencing just a very, very difficult time getting deals done and keeping them all together until closing.
Right.
Well, and this is where it's really critical to for agents that are out there, because I don't, you know, this higher rate climate is going to be here. I don't see, you know, if we get to mid-sixes by the end of the year, we should all be really happy. I think that would be best case scenario if the Fed does cut. But these people that said 5 by the end of the year, I've got a really hard time with that now. I don't think it's going to go there. And the good news is inventory is rising, and you can't have it both ways, right? You can't have buyers getting low rates and more inventory, and sellers can't have, you know, low rates and no competition forever. So this is what happens in markets, and it's really a matter of, does it make sense for you to make a move? Agents that are out there, they've got to know this agreement of sale backwards and forwards, because when something comes up, there's usually a pretty clear way to handle it. I was talking to someone on our team. I'm not going to drop this person's name here because you might know who we're talking about. And there was a question of, hey, we got the mortgage commitment and the rate is floating. They haven't locked in a rate yet. And I know exactly what the agreement of sale says, because there's a range on there for people. It says, I'm going to accept this rate up to this rate. So let's say it's between 6.5% up to 7.5%. What the agreement of sale says that most agents don't realize is that as long as you have the right to lock in the rate, you're moving ahead. So if you're one of these people that's trying to time the market and like,
so if at one point it was in that range while you could have
they have the right to lock it, they are obligated to move ahead, because that's an out that someone has. And what's amazing to me is the agent on the other side of this, they didn't want to hear it. They didn't understand it. And this person has been doing business for double-digit years. And this is one of the challenges right now. People don't know what the contract says. I've had this question for folks when there's a walkthrough issue, and I don't know if you've ever run into this as well. The buyer agent will call and say, all right, we got a problem at the walkthrough. And I say, great, what would you like us to do? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, this is what the contract says. Like, you can't, and part of the challenge with deals blowing out, Stacey, we talked about, you were having a situation earlier. You knew what the agreement of sale said. You knew what the consequences were. When agents don't know that, they just think their clients can get out for whatever reason they want. And there is a contract that is in place here that's the same contract every single time. So you have no excuse not to know this. We're not writing new agreements. This isn't another state. And that knowledge will keep your transactions together because you head it off before it even gets to the other party. And that's a big problem with real estate agents in every single state in the country. It's not just Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and to your point about what potentially what almost happened, my client really wanted me to go to the other side and explain the situation. And I knew well enough that these things are very emotional, and we have to just keep it business. And we have to explain contractually what this means.
Yeah.
They kept going back to the emotional side of it, and please talk to the other side. But I said, look, why don't we just wait and see what happens on Monday? And if it is a definitive, if it's decided on Monday, then we can work through this further. Well, it's a good thing I didn't go to the other side, because then it was all for naught. And you do not want to raise any alarm bells at all. ever. So just keeping it really business on my end and not getting emotional, just being the, even keel. Let's be level-headed. Let's wait a little bit and see if something really is defined that this is going to take place. But then, it did not happen. So none of that needed to be said.
Right. When you can't get the cat back in the bag,
No.
Once you start raising alarm bells and stuff, it just makes the rest of the transaction very nervous.
And then there's trust issues.
Yep.
And that exactly. It makes everybody tense.
Well, and especially then the seller is the one who ultimately decides which offer to accept, but when you've beat out because I'm assuming that he wasn't the only person putting an offer in,
Absolutely.
So you beat out other people. You're vouching for your clients as you're moving forward. And it just creates a situation best avoided.
And I had worked with the agent before on a couple other deals.
Yeah.
So we have a rapport.
Yeah.
I would have presented it anyway if I had to.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely glad we waited because it did, like Tom said, it's so emotional, these transactions, and we have to be the ones with the level heads. We can't be the over emotional, like you said, Tom, yelling and screaming, and it gets you nowhere. Right. You can't even think right if you let that, your head start spinning out.
Right. It is kind of an interesting balance, though, of some piece of information comes to your attention and you want to handle things right away so that stuff doesn't pile up or you knew about this for how many days, but also being let's take a breather because just getting a piece of information and then immediately screaming fire doesn't make things go better. So it is a little bit of a balancing act of staying on top of things, staying true to timeframes and not tying things up, but also giving a little bit of room for some emotions to, even out.
Yes.
But you got to know your timeframes, right? You can't force these answers. You can't when you start to become that pain in the butt agent on the other side, people don't want to work with you. So when things are volatile like they are, and it's hard enough putting sales together, given that rates are back over 7, and we're seeing inventory rise, which is creating more indecision for buyers in a lot of cases. I think that might be one of the challenges you're seeing, Stacey. That you have to know what you're dealing with, and letting things play out is the sign of a strong agent. So we'll see what happens at this Fed meeting. What I'm most interested to hear is not what happens at the meeting, it's the comments afterwards every single time. Because if they make a move on the rate, that's not gonna happen here. I would be shocked if that was the case. When they make a move on the rate, that kind of precursors everything. You know what's going on. It's the language afterwards is what you need to be mindful of here. So I'll be very curious to see what the comments are and if real estate and housing is even mentioned by Jerome Powell when he wraps things up later this week. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk about this Kevin Sears, president of NAR, National Association of Realtors interview with Byron Lazine over at Now BAM. We're also going to be talking about this home services settlement as well as Douglas Elliman and where things go from here with NAR and the commission lawsuits. And that'll be next on Tool Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM.
For the best local mortgage service and great rates on your money, look no further than Mortgage America. We've been operating in the greater Philadelphia area for 40 years with a focus on smooth, easy access to home purchasing. Whether you're a first-time buyer, upsizing or downsizing, or just refinancing, we have programs for you. We also have closing cost assistance programs and access to subsidized interest rates. Pre-approval is free, no costs or commitments. To learn more, visit our website at mymortgageamerica.com or give us a call at 610-439-8000. We always have a person available to take your call with around-the-clock human service. Purchase your home with the personalized, local service you find at Mortgage America.
Mortgage America is an equal housing lender. NMLS 128501.
The Tom Toole Sales Group is the #1 RE/MAX team in Pennsylvania with over $165 million in volume for 2021. I'm Tom Toole, and our team has achieved that kind of success by being a great place to work with and to work for. No one knows Greater Philly better than we do. We know real estate, but more importantly, we're real people. We hire the best agents and we give them all the tools to succeed. Even our brand new agents sell 17 to 24 homes a year because our team delivers the best experience in real estate. Teams deliver a better experience than individuals, and we're a top 1% real estate team in the country. We call it AAA service. We're your advocate, ally, and advisor. because this isn't a transaction to us. It's a relationship. If you're buying or selling a home, call the Tom Toole Sales Group at RE/MAX main line at 610-692-6976 or visit tomtoole.com. That's tomtoole.com. Sell your home for more, and remember the real estate golden rule. You always get more when you work with Tom Toole.
When you're getting a mortgage, you shouldn't have to sacrifice great service just to get a great rate. At Mortgage America, we've been lending with this philosophy for over 35 years. We have access to great low rates without the complications and delays of big or online banks. We're a local Pennsylvania lender with loan officers that you can actually meet. As PHFA's #1 lender, we specialize in all residential mortgage programs, including first-time buyer programs and low down payment options. For your free pre-approval, call us at 610-439-8000 or apply online at mymortgageamerica.com.
Mortgage America is an equal housing lender, NMLS 1285001.
Have you considered a career in real estate? Do you want control over your income? Whether you have a license or not, call us today at 610-692-6976 or visit tomtoole.com. Join our team, the Tom Toole Sales Group at RE/MAX main line.
All right. Welcome back to Tool Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM. I'm Tom Toole. She's Sarah Tymon. She's Stacey Mitchell. We all work at the Tom Toole Sales Group at RE/MAX main line, the #1 RE/MAX team in Pennsylvania since 2018. And we're going to be talking about an hour-long interview with no question screening, not one of these NAR's got to approve all the questions, with NAR President Kevin Sears. And we also have some news on Berkshire Hathaway, parent company Home Services, and Douglas Elliman settling the commission lawsuit case, which happened the end of last week. So where do you two want to start? Do you want to talk about the settlement, or do you want to talk about the interview with Kevin Sears?
I'm good with either.
Thanks for the feedback. All right. So the NAR interview, NAR President Kevin Sears. So I listened to the whole thing. I know I sent this to you guys today to take a listen to, and this was at the T3 conference from T360. They're one of these real estate data firms, Stefan Swanpoel's company. And there's all kinds of CEOs that show up at this thing. I've gone to it in the past. You got like Rich Barton from Zillow, Kevin Sears, Mauricio was there from the agency, which I was kind of surprised about. And these people are like all like taking notes, and it's very interesting. So Byron was able to get Kevin Sears to do an interview with some arm twisting from Jared James, who's a real estate coach. He didn't want to do it originally. And what I would first things first, I want to give him credit for sitting down with them, because there was no way any of these other CEOs would have sat down and done it with NAR. I also know a very prominent CEO who would not sit down for an interview with Byron, even though people from the company have in the past. I thought that was a bad move. I'm not going to share the name of the company. So I like that Kevin Sears sat down and chatted with him. And I listened to the whole thing. I mean, did you guys get a chance to listen to this, or?
Just snippets.
Okay, so the big takeaways I had from this were he was a little surprised about the questions about the $45 million marketing budget, and the as well as the questions about staff salaries. He kind of deflected those, but they didn't screen any questions. And what I found pretty interesting was that, for the most part, he did mention there's kind of a, he's been working for NAR longer than he's been a real estate agent, and he's been doing these like on the road updates and talking about what's going on. So the first thing was decision making with NAR, and they talked about how there's the current interim CEO Nakia Wright, and who's doing what, because I think that's a big question. So apparently the CEO Nakia Wright is in charge of the staff, plain and simple. She handles the staff issues. As president, Kevin Sears is the chief spokesperson for the association, which is why we see and hear from him more than we do from Nakia Wright. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It also aligns with what we've seen in the past. But tell me what you think about these comments about the budget. So they talked about the $46 million and $45 million budgets in 21 and 22 for Havas Marketing Group. And they contribute to the Who We Are campaigns. Have you seen any of these commercials on TV?
You know what? I caught one the other night.
Did you?
I did.
I
Yeah.
also saw one the other night.
And I was like, they're trying to like...
It was during an NBA playoff game.
Maybe that's what
Yeah,
it
it
was.
was the same one, yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? Because I swear I've
There it
never
is.
seen that before.
Yeah.
And
that might have been one of the worst commercials I've ever seen.
Caught my attention.
It caught my attention as a real estate agent, but I wouldn't have paid attention otherwise. What did you think of the commercial?
Right. Well, I think I was just more surprised to see it. Like, oh my gosh, they're trying to fix their reputation was my first thought, right? They're trying to repair, make amends, or trying to, dust off all that negativity.
Right.
I think, that was my first thought.
So what President Kevin Sears said, and I thought I think this is a smart move in general. I don't know if it justifies spending close to $100 million, is that the commercials are aimed at enhancing public perception and understanding of realtors, which I think does make sense in a lot of ways. I don't know how effective they are. I mean, the fact that this is, we're hypersensitive to this stuff, Stacey, right? Like you see it, you're like, oh, I'm listening. I've heard ads on The Fanatic here, one of the sister stations of WWDB. So I've heard realtor ads on there as well. I don't think anyone really pays attention.
No. I don't think so either.
And if you look at the 1,000-watt survey, 1,000 Watts, a marketing company that gives like advice and consults, people really can't make a difference. They can't understand the difference between a realtor versus a real estate agent, which is something we're forced to do anyways. It doesn't really help. So that was questioned. So you don't like the commercial, Stacey?
I think that the money could be spent better elsewhere because
that
honestly,
I agree with.
It's like people don't know the difference.
Right.
They're like, realtor? What's that? As what? As opposed to an agent that's at Remax or one's at a Compass or whatever. You know what I mean? They don't. There's no difference. Nothing to differentiate between all of that.
Right. And I don't know that the general public really cares.
I agree 100%.
Even if you spend the money to get the point across,
right.
I don't think they care.
They don't care. They want an agent. They want somebody to help them through the process. That's it.
Yeah.
Somebody knowledgeable, somebody that's going to help them through and have success.
Right.
I don't think that, have you ever been asked if you were part of NAR? If you're a realtor,
no.
Have you been asked that?
But the problem is we have the tie-in. We don't have you want MLS access, you have to be a realtor.
Right. So everybody in this area is anyway.
Yeah. You have
so what's
to do
the difference?
It just always makes me think of there's a Modern Family clip that it just always makes me think of. I'm a realtor. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to agree with you on that one. So I think that's we're all on the same page there. Then they talked about where the dues go. I'll come to the staff salaries in a second here. So one of the things that I do believe NAR has served people better with is advocacy in Washington, D.C. So NAR has got a very clear advocacy effort aimed to influence policy beneficial to the real estate sector. And they do have a team in place in D.C. with Shannon McGahn. She's the senior vice president, the chief advocacy officer. And, unfortunately, Washington, D.C. is all about relationships, as we know. So there are legislative meetings coming up in D.C., and there's two main focuses: tax incentives for home and property ownership, and equal access to professional representation for all consumers and protecting fair housing. That's fine. I don't have any issue with that. I think you do need advocacy there. That's one thing where they're so Sarah, you had to get a door knocking permit, correct?
Yes.
So that's your NAR dues at work, because most people cannot canvass door to door. You're not allowed to do that. That's a usual. If you look at the township, it was Lower Merion Township, right?
Yes, but that wasn't NAR that did that. We had to go apply for it and pay for it.
So I disagree. NAR got the law in place that you're allowed to get the permit. That is your dues at work. I'm convinced of that because if you look at most municipalities here, you can't door-to-door canvass with the exception of a few things, right? And real estate agents are one of them. So that is your dues at work. And this obviously happened probably before I even started selling real estate. It was like that when I got into the business. But that's the kind of stuff they advocate. And they allow people to do that because you can't do that as many other professionals. You had to fill out an application. You know why they had you fill out an application? To make sure you were a legitimate professional that could actually go door knocking, right? Mm-hmm. How often do you get people knocking at your door? It's either that or energy, or is it the two things that you see?
There's
the
a
group
lot
energy
of door knocking.
What else do you get?
No real estate agents have ever come to my door. Wi-Fi services.
Yeah.
It's usually with utilities.
Usually utilities and religion.
When I lived in the city, all the time. Like, and a lot of and I mean, some of them were like good causes and stuff, but for looking for donations for camps or for water or for just different things, but like very frequently.
Oh, I had a little Girl Scout knock for cookies.
Oh, well, that's a fun one.
Well,
It was great.
That's totally different.
Yeah,
Yes.
I bought from her, of course.
Yeah.
Sucker.
Well, now I have a very long driveway, so I feel like there may be people that like would be like, I'm not going down there.
Yeah. But other than that, yeah, they're the two main ones.
It's utilities or maybe like lawn care. I feel like that's maybe come before.
No, I don't think you can do that. They usually drop off something to you.
Okay.
So here's
flyers.
Here's
Gotcha.
Lower Merion Township. This is the township code, right? And it talks about canvassing and soliciting. And we'll get back to the Kevin Sears interview in a second here. It says the sale of goods, services, merchandise, including but not limited to magazine subscriptions or other printed material, or the obtaining of contracts for home and building devices, repairs, improvements, or services upon residential premises, upon any street, etc. That's all fine. So it says the term, the words shall be construed to have the meaning set forth, and they explain like what canvassing is, right? So, and exclusions it's on behalf of a religious or political cause. So we get politicians that have knocked on our door. Mm-hmm. An organization that's exempt from registration under the Pennsylvania Solicitation of Funds for Charitable Purposes Act. Any person under 19 years of age who takes orders for greeting cards, candy from schools. Proprietor of a commercial enterprise adjacent to a public sidewalk, such as a sidewalk sale, or an agreement with the township for the operation of marketplace. And then they have like snow removal, yard work, including those things. So they require you to register, and you have to fill out the application to register. So there's not a lot that's in there, right? I mean, it's very limited. That's kind of the point. So that's your dues at work. So that's where NAR comes in with that. Then they talk about these staff salaries. So, because they got a big payment coming up here to pay out this settlement that's going to be happening. So during the staff salaries, Byron questioned all of the staff salaries. So Bob Goldberg was making just shy of $2.6 million. He didn't comment on that, and he said and then he asked if how members can get involved if they don't like the staff salaries. And this is what he said. And then I want to get into some agent reactions. The way the members have the conversation, we have a finance committee. We submit a budget to the board of directors, and in that budget there is money earmarked for the staff to pay them for their professional work that they do to care for our association and good jobs that they do. What I'll tell you is the professional staff that we have definitely earn their paycheck and represent us well. So he's basically saying you want to get involved if you want to have a say, which I think is part of the problem here. So, and they've got this big payment coming out with the $418 million that's coming due, and they said dues aren't going up for the next 2 years. I found that to be pretty interesting. So here's what the agent responses were, and tell me what you think of these, and then we can get into these settlements. We got about 10 minutes left here, not even. So a lot of credit to Byron for getting them on. Tell me what you think of this comment. Love that Kevin was up for the conversation, but I think his story shows my issue with NAR. Newer agents and agents my age see the committees and boards and see it as a bloated, inefficient bureaucracy. The idea we should participate in the broken system shows a lack of understanding. What we want to see is NAR tearing down the bureaucracy and building an association for the future, something with vision beyond the R. Everything is reactionary, but there's a severe lack of vision. What do you think about that?
What is different internally with the company? With NAR, what are they going to be advocating differently? There was 2 points that you said, Tom, that they're going to be discussing it with Congress. And what was it? Tax savings for buyers
and access to fair housing.
And access to fair housing. Okay, we've done that over and over and over again, right? Mm-hmm. What's new? What's new and creative and cutting edge and different, especially with everything that's going on? They're kind of like still in the past.
Just using the same playbook.
Right. So and I agree. It's like, well, what has really been totally reshaped within the organization? Seems like it's all the same.
Yeah.
Still doing the same things, same players, just shuffling deck chairs, right? That comment is pretty valid, actually.
Mm-hmm. One of the other comments, unfortunately, he gave political answers. It didn't convey upbeat excitement about being a part of them. Felt it was justifying everything versus facing them.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, that organization has a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Internally.
I mean, I feel like from where I was listening at, there were a couple of different things that came up, and he was just kind of like, that's not my lane.
Yeah.
Well, what's his lane?
Well, I think there's some of it in terms of the structure. Like, he's meant to be the mouthpiece versus the CEO. I mean, the CEO, you don't even hear from this person. So, and that was kind of what happened with Bob Goldberg as well. So I give the guy credit for sitting down. They didn't screen the questions. Nothing was off limits. But, I mean, you can, when you're at this conference, like they have a half-hour, like, fireside chat, if you will. He started off with, like, a story. That eats up 10 minutes. Then Stefan doesn't give like the follow-up questions. I've seen this go. I mean, you can dance around that. So I do give him credit for doing this. At the same time, we're kind of hearing more of the same. And this marketing budget, I mean, I would have loved that to be the legal budget to
for better
to go through
representation.
things. And,
Right.
and so, I mean, I think that's part of the problem here is this marketing budget doesn't do a whole lot for us.
Right.
So
maybe they should, pull from that and apply it towards other areas. Yeah.
And I think the thing that's clear from this is that the MLSs are not letting go of the real order tie-in. I think that's pretty clear from hearing these interviews and the MLS CEOs. And the MLS has all the power right now. They do not want to give that up. And I think it's both of them, right? The MLS can do. Let me back that up. The real NAR is not giving up the MLS tie-in, not the other way around. Meaning they want to hold on to that as long as they can because what other value do they have? I can tell you as an organization and a company, I would say, hey, like let's opt out. How does everyone feel about that? And we would probably just do that because I don't see a lot of value with it, unfortunately. I mean, there's dispute resolution, but that's about it, and that happens once in a while. So with that in mind, let's talk about real quickly. So home services, you ready for this number that they settled for? $250 million. What do you think about that? Big number. This happened on Friday.
Yeah, that's huge, but that company is huge.
I agree with that.
So I think it's in line, actually.
Right.
And that's probably what was anticipated from them anyway, since they're such a large organization.
Yeah. Or maybe I've been like slightly jaded now, but once not like billions were being thrown out at one point, it's like, $250
million. They got off easy.
Yeah.
What was the largest, it was the largest settlement for any of the private companies. And they also have an $869 billion market cap. So, I mean, this is very small for them. And what's been the MO here is that they get as much as they can out of these companies. So, the fact that Warren Buffett's settling, I think, is a good sign for real estate because he sees a bright future for it. Otherwise, why not just shut down the company and say, screw it? So I think that's a good thing here. They were negotiating this. They were the last to settle. They were the biggest company out of all of them in terms of who the parent companies were. So I think all that's fine. And then we had Douglas Elliman. Now, this is like crazy to me, right? So look at Douglas Elliman's settlement number. They settled for, let me get the right number here. Here it is. They settled for $7.75 million. Maybe another $10 million in the coming year. So let's call it $17.75. I think it shows you the difference between a Warren Buffett-owned company that's home services is a subsection of versus a real estate-only company, because that's probably a big number there.
Yeah. What I find more fascinating is that the law firms for the plaintiffs are seeking 1/3 of the payouts.
Yeah.
So they're requesting 1/3
Yeah.
of the money collected.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Sounds like more than 6%.
Is that
I don't know where you get this percentage number from, Sarah. Commissions have been and always are negotiable.
right? It doesn't sound like these lawyers want to negotiate their fee,
Right.
And they're okay with taking these people that were harmed in this, or supposedly harmed in this lawsuit. They're okay with taking such a large chunk of their money,
Right.
Because their argument was, well, we didn't know if we were going to actually, if this was actually going to settle. We didn't know. So we were working all these hours and we were
What
putting
do you
all
think
this
we do?
time. And exactly. It's like monumentally hypocritical. And that just made my head explode. Sorry, I just had to say that.
Oh my God.
Right.
Well, and we got to end here in a second. I think it's smart for these companies to move on, because I do see a lot of opportunity for real estate agents as we move ahead, because there's a lot of people that are dabblers, that are part-time, that really have no business selling real estate and handling these assets. And the challenge that you run into with them is that as a result, a lot of their actions have gotten us into this in the first place. So it would have been nice. I mean, NAR could have taken some leadership here. We've talked about that at length. So, and they're just playing damage control right now. So not surprising here. I think it's a good move for both companies just to move on is really the best thing. I mean, because once NAR folded, that was the end of that. So that's it for this week's episode. A lot of commission stuff, a lot of Fed news. We'll be back next week. You want to follow Sarah? She's at Ty_TyTime on Instagram. You can follow Stacey at _2 Mitchko. You can follow me at Tom Toole 3RD at Tom Toole 3rd. And we'll be back next week on Tool Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM.